Jake Morrison stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling rose high above him, covered in lights that looked like stars. Around him sat 12 different alien species. Each one looked different from the others. Some had blue skin, others had tentacles instead of arms. A few had multiple eyes that blinked at different times. Jake wore his best uniform. The dark blue fabric had small medals on the chest. His gray hair was cut short and neat. His face showed no emotion as he waited. Behind him sat Dr. Lisa Yang, the human ambassador. She had served in this role for 10 years. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple style. She watched the aliens with careful eyes. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood up first. He was tall and thin with purple skin that seemed to shine under the lights. His voice was deep and carried across the hall. "We have called this meeting to discuss the human problem," he said. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach, but his face did not change. "For 200 years, humans have been part of our council," the Chancellor continued. "But we can no longer ignore the facts. Humans are too violent. They are too unpredictable. They do not follow our ways of peace." Jake knew this was coming. The signs had been there for months. Human ships were being stopped more often at borders. Human traders were being questioned for longer periods. Human colonies were being inspected without warning. But he had hoped the council would see reason. Dr. Yang leaned forward in her seat. She had prepared for this moment. Her files contained hundreds of examples of human help across the galaxy. Humans had stopped wars, cured diseases, and saved entire worlds from disasters. But she could see in the aliens' faces that facts would not matter today. The Altarian representative spoke next. She looked like a large bird with silver feathers and bright orange eyes. "Human soldiers are too aggressive," she said. "They fight when they should talk. They use force when they should use wisdom." Jake almost laughed at this. Human soldiers had saved Altarian colonies 3 times in the past decade. Each time, the Altarians had begged for human help when their own forces failed. But now they called humans too aggressive. The Christek delegate was next. His body was made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through his form as he spoke. "Humans take too many risks," he said. "They explore where others fear to go. They ask questions that should not be asked. They disturb the natural order. One by one, each species spoke against humanity. The Aquarians said humans were too curious about their ocean worlds. The Vortex said humans asked too many questions about their technology. The Dendari complained that humans wanted to change everything they touched. Jake listened to each complaint. Most of them were things humans had been praised for in the past. Human curiosity had led to new medicines. Human questions had uncovered corruption in several governments. Human exploration had found new worlds for many species to call home. Lisa Yang stood up when the complaints ended. "May I speak for humanity?" she asked. The Chancellor nodded. "You may have 5 minutes." Lisa walked to the center of the hall. She looked at each alien representative as she spoke. "You say we are violent, but we have prevented more wars than we have fought. You say we are unpredictable, but we have kept our promises for 2 centuries. You say we take risks, but those risks have benefited everyone in this room." She pulled out a small device and activated it. Numbers appeared in the air above her head. "In the past 50 years, human doctors have saved 47 million alien lives. Human engineers have built safe homes on 63 worlds. Human scientists have created food sources that feed billions across the galaxy." The numbers meant nothing to the council. Jake could see it in their faces. They had already decided. This was not a trial. It was a sentencing. The Chancellor raised his hand for silence. "The council has voted," he said. "The decision is final. Humanity will be restricted to their home system. All human colonies outside of Sol System must be abandoned. All human trade routes are closed. All human representatives are removed from council positions. Jake felt the words hit him like ice water. 200 years of partnership were ending in this moment. Generations of humans had worked to build these relationships. Now they were being thrown away because of fear. The vote was 11-0. The Chancellor continued. Humanity's seat is removed from this council. You have 30 days to comply with these orders. Jake stood up slowly. He was a tall man, and in the silence of the hall he seemed even taller. Every alien eye was on him. They expected him to shout, to argue, to threaten them with human military power. Some of them looked ready to call for guards. Instead, Jake did something that shocked them all. He nodded once, turned around, and walked toward the door. His boots made soft sounds on the stone floor. Behind him, Lisa Yang gathered her files and followed. Neither human said a word. The aliens watched in confusion as the human delegation left the hall. There were no angry words, no threats of war, no promises of revenge. Just silence. Outside the hall, other humans waited. Captain Ryan Davis had come from his ship in orbit. Lieutenant Amy Foster stood beside him in her military uniform. Dr. Kevin Brooks had traveled from the medical station on Centauri Prime. All of them had heard the news. Jake stopped in front of them. His voice was quiet, but clear. We're going home, he said. All of us. We leave Council space in 30 days. Sir, Captain Davis started to speak. Jake held up his hand. No arguments, Ryan. The Council has made their choice. Now we make ours. Within hours, the message went out to every human in Council space. The words were simple and direct. Pack your things. We're going home. Bring everything that belongs to us. Leave nothing behind. The aliens expected anger and resistance. Instead, they got something much more frightening. They got silence. Humans across the galaxy began to pack their belongings without complaint or protest. They loaded their ships with everything they had built, everything they had discovered, everything they had created. The great human withdrawal had begun. Dr. Kevin Brooks walked through the medical center on Centauri Prime for the last time. The building had been his life's work for 20 years. He had designed every room, chosen every piece of equipment, trained every doctor who worked there. Now he was taking it all apart. The Centaurian patients watched him with worried eyes. They were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes. Many of them owed their lives to Kevin's work. He had cured diseases that had killed their people for thousands of years. He had taught their doctors new ways to heal injuries that were once fatal. Dr. Brooks, said Zintar, the head of the Centaurian Medical Board, please, you must reconsider. Without your research, many of our people will die. Kevin continued packing his equipment into storage containers. Each machine represented years of research and development. The tissue regeneration unit had taken him 5 years to perfect. The neural scanner could detect brain problems before symptoms appeared. The genetic therapy chamber could fix birth defects at the cellular level. I'm sorry, Zintar, Kevin said without looking up. The Council has made their decision. Humans are no longer welcome in Council space. But this is different, Zintar pleaded. This is medicine. This saves lives. Politics should not matter here. Kevin finally stopped packing and looked at his old friend. You voted with the Council, didn't you? Your government supported the human ban. Zintar's large eyes looked away. The vote was about security, not medicine. We never meant for this. To affect the hospitals. Everything is connected, Zintar. You can't throw out humans and keep their work. Kevin sealed another container. Besides, this equipment was built with human technology. It belongs to us. Across the galaxy, similar. Scenes played out on 1,000 worlds. Senator Claire Adams coordinated the massive operation from Earth's orbital station. The logistics were incredible. 3 billion humans lived and worked outside Earth's solar system. Each one needed transport home. Each one had belongings to pack. Claire stood in the command center, watching screens that showed ship movements across the galaxy. Red dots represented human vessels heading home. The dots moved slowly but steadily toward Earth. It looked like blood flowing back to a heart. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Colonel Danny Wilson, "the Altarian government is asking if our medical staff can stay for another 6 months. They're offering to pay triple wages." Claire almost smiled. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to read." "The Council's ruling. All humans out of Council space in 30 days, no exceptions." Captain Nicole Parker commanded the cargo ship Montana's Pride. Her holds were packed with equipment from the Human Research Station on Kepler 442b. The station had been studying ways to grow food on desert planets. Their work had made it possible for 12 different species to colonize worlds that were once considered worthless. Nicole's crew worked day and night to load everything. They took apart laboratories piece by piece. They downloaded every file from every computer. They even took the plants from the experimental gardens. If it was human-made or human-discovered, it went on the ship. "Captain," said her first officer, Lieutenant Ben Taylor, "the Zephyrian planetary governor wants to speak with you." Nicole didn't look up from her checklist. "Tell him I'm busy." "He says it's urgent. Something about the food production facilities failing without our people. Not our problem anymore, Ben. They wanted us gone. Now we're leaving." The governor had good reason to be worried. The food production facilities on Kepler 442b fed 17 billion people across 4 star systems. The humans who ran those facilities had been quietly solving problems for years. They knew which nutrients the soil needed, which crops grew best in different seasons, and how to stop the insects that destroyed harvests. Without the humans, the first crop failures began within weeks. The Zephyrian farmers didn't know why their plants were dying. The human records were written in Earth languages that few aliens could read. Even when they were translated, the knowledge didn't transfer easily. It took experience and intuition to know when to add fertilizer or how to spot early signs of disease. Dr. Michelle Roberts supervised the shutdown of the Quantum Communication Network's main hub on Proxima Station. The network connected every Council world with instant communication across the galaxy. Messages could travel from one side of Council space to the other in less than a second. The aliens thought the network was their technology. They had paid for it and they used it every day. But the truth was more complicated. The network was based on human quantum theory. Human engineers had designed the relay stations. Human technicians maintained the delicate equipment. "Dr. Roberts," said Commander Velkan, the station's Altarian security chief, "you cannot take this equipment. It belongs to the Council." Michelle looked at the quantum processors she was carefully removing from their housing. Each one was worth more than a small planet. These processors were built on Earth using human patents. The software was written by human programmers. The maintenance protocols were developed by human engineers. But the Council paid for the construction. The Council paid for installation and housing. They never bought the technology itself. Michelle placed another processor in its protective case. "Besides, without human technicians to maintain it, the network will fail anyway. We're just speeding up the process." Velkan's feathers ruffled with anxiety. "How long will the network continue to function?" Michelle did some quick calculations in her head. 6 months, maybe 8 if you're lucky. The quantum coherence will start breaking down without proper maintenance. You'll lose connection to the outer systems first, then the core worlds. The Vorthan Empire watched humanity's withdrawal with great interest. Admiral Beth Thompson met with Vorthan officials at the border between human and Vorthan space. The Vorthons were traditional enemies of the Council, but they had always respected human neutrality. "Admiral Thompson," said War Commander Thexel, his scarred face showing curiosity, "my government wishes to offer humanity sanctuary. You could establish colonies in Vorthan space." Beth considered the offer carefully. The Vorthons were offering what the Council had taken away. "That's generous, War Commander. But humanity has decided to return home. You would refuse our protection? Our trade routes?" We appreciate the offer, but we're not looking for new masters. We're going home to figure out our own path. Thexel's expression showed confusion. In Vorthon culture, the strong protected, the weak in exchange for service. You reject alliance, you choose isolation. We choose independence. The first cracks in council unity appeared within weeks of humanity's departure. The Christek Consortium discovered that their mining operations were failing without human safety protocols. The mining robots that harvested rare minerals from asteroid belts were making more mistakes. Equipment was breaking down more often. 3 mining stations had already been lost to accidents that human oversight would have prevented. The Aquarian Federation faced a different crisis. Their ocean worlds depended on careful balance between different forms of sea life. Human marine biologists had spent decades learning how these ecosystems worked. They knew which species to protect and which to control. Without them, the delicate balance began to collapse. On Aquarius Prime, the blue-scaled inhabitants watched their coral cities start to die. The coral that formed their buildings was actually a living organism. It needed specific chemicals to survive. The humans had developed those chemicals and taught the Aquarians how to make them. But the formulas were complex, and small mistakes had big consequences. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his ship as it crossed into human space. Behind him, Council territory grew smaller in the distance. Ahead lay Earth, the blue-green world that had given birth to humanity. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we're receiving messages from Council worlds. They're asking when we'll return." Jake almost laughed. "Return? They threw us out. Why would we return?" "They seem to think this is temporary. They expect us to come back when emotions cool down." Jake shook his head. The aliens still didn't understand. This wasn't an emotional reaction. This was a logical response to an impossible situation. The Council had made it clear that humans weren't wanted, so humans would stay where they were wanted. The great ships of humanity crossed the invisible line that marked the border of human space. Behind them, they left 2 centuries of cooperation and friendship. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also freedom. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 6 months after the last human ship crossed into Earth space, the galaxy began to feel their absence in ways the Council had never imagined. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez had once been stationed on the border worlds between Council space and the Void Raiders territory. The Void Raiders were a nomadic species that traveled in massive fleets, taking what they wanted from weaker civilizations. For 15 years, Steve had coordinated the defense of 47 worlds along that border. He knew every asteroid field, every trade route, every hiding spot the Raiders used. He had studied their attack patterns and learned to predict their movements. His strategies had kept the Raiders contained to empty space, protecting billions of innocent lives. Now the border worlds were defended by a mixed force of Council species. They had the same ships, the same weapons, even some of the same officers. What they didn't have was Steve's knowledge. They didn't know that the Raiders always attacked during the 3rd week of the local month when defensive patrols were at their lowest. They didn't know that the Raiders used civilian ships as shields, making it hard to return fire without killing innocents. The first major Raider attack came at Kepler Station, a trading post that served 12 different worlds. The defense fleet responded exactly as their training manuals said they should. They formed a battle line and engaged the enemy ships directly. Within 3 hours, Kepler Station was burning wreckage and 50,000 people were dead. Dr. Michelle Roberts sat in her new laboratory on Earth's moon, monitoring the quantum communication network she had helped to build. The network was failing faster than she had predicted. The outer systems had already lost contact with the Council core worlds. The middle systems were experiencing increasing delays and data corruption. "Dr. Roberts," said her assistant, Dr. Carl Kim, We're receiving emergency signals from the Altarian sector. Their quantum relays are completely down. Michelle looked at the data on her screen. The quantum coherence patterns were breaking down across the network. Without proper maintenance, the delicate quantum states that allowed instant communication were collapsing into random noise. How long before total network failure? Carl asked. At this rate? 3 months for the core worlds, maybe less. Michelle turned away from the screen. They'll have to go back to light-speed communication. Messages will take years to cross their territory instead of seconds. The communication breakdown had immediate effects across Council space. Trade agreements that depended on instant coordination began to fall apart. Military units lost contact with their command structures. Scientific research projects that required data sharing between multiple worlds ground to a halt. On the Christek homeworld, Chancellor Vexhai called an emergency council session. Only 8 of the original 12 species attended. The Aquarian Federation was dealing with ecological collapse on their ocean worlds. The Dendari Collective was fighting a civil war that had started when their communication systems failed. The Centauri Republic was struggling with medical crises that were killing thousands daily. We need to address the human situation, Chancellor Vexhai said to the remaining council members. His crystal form flickered with anxious light patterns. Our civilizations are suffering without their support. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood up. His purple skin had lost its shine, and he looked tired. You want to ask them to return? After we banish them from council space? I want to negotiate. Perhaps we were too hasty in our decision. The Altarian representative, General Kethva, spread her silver wings in a gesture of disagreement. They left without fighting. They accepted our judgment. Why should we doubt ourselves now? Because our worlds are dying, Vexhai said bluntly. The Christek mining colonies have lost 60% of their production. 3 asteroid mining stations have been destroyed by equipment failures that human engineers would have prevented. Captain Danny Wilson commanded the border patrol ship New Horizon. His job was to monitor the edge of human space and ensure that Earth's isolation remained complete. It was a boring assignment, but an important one. Humanity had chosen isolation, and that choice needed to be protected. Captain, said Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the ship's communications officer, we have 3 council ships approaching our border. They're requesting permission to enter human space. Danny looked at the ships on his tactical display. 2 were diplomatic vessels, probably carrying ambassadors. The 3rd was a military escort. What do they want? They're asking for a meeting with human leadership. They say it's urgent. Danny had his orders. No council ships were allowed to cross into human space. No exceptions. Send them a message. Tell them that human space is closed to council traffic. Direct them to leave the area immediately. Sir, they're insisting that this is a diplomatic emergency. Then they should have thought about that before they kicked us out. Danny's voice was calm but firm. Send the message. If they don't leave in 1 hour, we'll escort them out. The council ships received the message and held their position just outside human space. For 3 days, they broadcast requests for negotiation. Danny ignored them all. On the 4th day, the ships finally turned around and headed back to council space. The rejection sent shockwaves through the remaining council governments. For 2 centuries, humans had been willing to talk about any problem, negotiate any dispute, find solutions to any crisis. Now they wouldn't even listen to diplomatic requests. The Vorthan Empire made its move during this period of council weakness. War Commander Thexel launched simultaneous attacks on 3 former council worlds that had become isolated after the communication network failed. Without the ability to call for help or coordinate their defenses, the worlds fell within days. Admiral Beth Thompson watched the Vorthan expansion from her command post on Mars. Earth's intelligence networks were still functioning, even if they were no longer shared with the Council. Beth knew about every Vorthan ship movement, every attack, every victory. Ma'am, said her intelligence officer, Major Lisa Brooks, the Council is requesting our help against the Vorthan offensive. Beth almost laughed. They want our help? The same council that banned us from their space? They're offering full restoration of human rights and territories in exchange for military assistance. Beth studied the tactical reports. The Vorthon Empire was expanding rapidly into the power vacuum left by humanity's departure. Council worlds were falling one by one to Vorthon aggression. It was exactly what Beth had predicted would happen. "Send them a message," Beth said. "Tell them that human military forces are restricted to human space, as per the Council's own ruling. We cannot violate their sovereignty by entering their territory." The irony was not lost on the Council leaders. They had created the rules that now prevented humans from helping them. Their own laws were being used against them. The breaking point came when the Crystech Consortium's flagship, the Crystal Heart, suffered a catastrophic reactor failure. The ship was carrying 30,000 Crystech citizens, including most of their government's leadership. Human engineers had maintained the ship's reactor systems for decades, making tiny adjustments that prevented dangerous resonance buildups in the crystal matrix. Without those adjustments, the resonance patterns became unstable. The reactor core shattered in a chain reaction that tore the ship apart in seconds. There were no survivors. Dr. Alex Turner had been the chief engineer responsible for crystal reactor safety. He sat in his new office on Europa, reading the reports of the Crystal Heart's destruction. The technical data made it clear what had happened. A simple harmonic resonance that he could have prevented with a 5-minute adjustment. "Dr. Turner," said his colleague, Dr. Janet Davis, "the Crystech government is offering us anything we want if we'll return and help them prevent more reactor failures." Alex closed the file on his computer. "And what would we be returning to? A council that considers us too dangerous to be trusted? A government that threw us out because we asked too many questions?" But people are dying. People die every day, Janet. The difference is that these people chose to die without human help. We're respecting their choice. The Aquarian Federation faced total ecological collapse. Their ocean worlds had been carefully balanced ecosystems maintained by human marine biologists for over a century. The coral cities that housed billions of aquarians were dying. The food chains that supported their civilization were breaking down. Marine biologist Dr. Frank Rodriguez had spent 20 years working on Aquarius Prime. He had published dozens of research papers on aquarian ocean ecology. He knew more about their marine ecosystems than any other human alive. Frank received desperate messages from his former aquarian colleagues every day. They begged him to return, to help save their dying worlds. Frank read each message, and then deleted it. The Aquarians had voted to support the human ban. Now they would live with the consequences. The Zephyrian-Altarian trade war resumed with devastating fury. For 60 years, human mediators had kept peace between these two species. They had negotiated trade agreements, settled disputes, and prevented conflicts from escalating into violence. Without human mediation, every disagreement became a crisis. Old grudges that had been carefully managed for decades erupted into open warfare. Zephyrian trade fleets were attacked by Altarian warships. Altarian colonies were bombarded by Zephyrian bone. Year after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy was burning. General Patricia Hayes stood in the war room of Earth's defense headquarters on Luna, watching holographic displays that showed the collapse of galactic civilization. Red zones marked areas of active warfare. Yellow zones showed regions suffering from economic or ecological collapse. Green zones, indicating stable territories, had almost disappeared from the map. Patricia had been the Council's chief military strategist for 12 years before the ban. She had prevented 17 wars and stopped 3 genocides through careful diplomacy backed by the threat of human intervention. Now she watched those same regions tear themselves apart without human peacekeepers to maintain order. "General," said Colonel Tony Miller, her chief of staff, "the Void Raiders have broken through the Kepler defense line. They're heading for the core worlds." Patricia studied the tactical display. The raiders had learned that Council forces couldn't adapt to changing situations the way human commanders could. They were using new tactics, hitting multiple targets simultaneously to overwhelm the rigid Council command structure. "How many civilian casualties?" Patricia asked. "Initial reports suggest over 2 million dead on Kepler-7 alone. The Council Defense Force followed standard protocol and tried to protect military installations first." Patricia shook her head. Human doctrine had always prioritized civilian evacuation during raider attacks. Military bases could be rebuilt, but people couldn't be replaced. The Council forces still thought like soldiers instead of protectors. Dr. Alex Turner received another desperate message from the Christek government. This time, it wasn't just about reactor maintenance. The message was from Chancellor Vex High himself, begging humanity to return before Christek civilization collapsed entirely. "Dr. Turner," the message said, "we understand now that we made a terrible mistake. The Christek Consortium formally apologizes for supporting the human ban. We are prepared to offer full reparations and permanent council representation if humanity will return to help us." Alex shared the message with his research team. They sat in silence for several minutes, looking at the holographic projection of the desperate Chancellor. "What do you think?" asked Dr. Janet Davis. "I think it's too late," Alex replied. "The damage is done. Even if we wanted to help, it would take years to rebuild what they've destroyed. The Christek reactor failures were accelerating. Without human maintenance, the delicate crystal matrices that powered their civilization were becoming unstable. 3 more ships had been lost to reactor explosions. 17 ground-based power plants had shut down to prevent catastrophic failures. Billions of Christek citizens were living without power, and their crystal-based technology was shutting down piece by piece. The Aquarian Federation sent a different kind of message. Instead of begging for help, they sent a simple statement. "The Aquarian Federation withdraws from the Galactic Council. We no longer recognize Council authority." Dr. Frank Rodriguez wasn't surprised when he read the announcement. The Aquarian ocean worlds were dying, and the Council couldn't help them. Without human marine biologists, the coral cities were crumbling into the sea. The fish populations that fed billions of aquarians were disappearing. Entire species were going extinct. "Every day, Frank," said his colleague Dr. Amy Peterson, "maybe we should consider going back, at least to the Aquarian worlds. They're not part of the Council anymore." Frank looked at the latest ecological reports from Aquarius Prime. The numbers were devastating. The ocean's pH levels were changing without proper management. Algae blooms were killing massive areas of sea life. The coral that formed the foundation of Aquarian civilization was bleaching and dying. "Even if we went back tomorrow, it would take decades to fix the damage," Frank said. "The ecosystem collapse has gone too far. We'd be trying to rebuild from nothing." The Vorthon Empire continued its expansion into former Council territory. War Commander Thexel had captured 12 worlds in 6 months. His fleets faced no organized resistance. Council forces were too busy dealing with internal crises to mount effective defenses. Admiral Beth Thompson monitored Vorthan movements from her command center on Mars. Earth's military was stronger than ever, reinforced by returning veterans and new technology developed during humanity's isolation. But they stayed within human borders, watching the galaxy burn without intervening. "Admiral," said Captain Nicole Parker, who had returned from her cargo, runs to take a combat command. "Vorthan forces are approaching the Centauri system. If they take it, they'll control the main trade routes between the core worlds and the outer territories." Beth nodded. The Centauri system had been humanity's first colony outside Earth's solar system. Humans had built the space stations, established the trade routes, and maintained the peace for over a century. Now it was about to fall to Vorthon conquest. "Send a message to the Centauri government," Beth said. "Remind them that human space is closed to all refugees. They made their choice when they supported the ban. The message was cruel but necessary. If humanity started accepting refugees, it would undermine their policy of complete isolation. The galaxy needed to understand that the consequences of the human ban were permanent. President Rebecca Santos addressed the newly expanded Earth Congress. Representatives from dozens of human worlds filled the assembly hall. These were people who had built lives across the galaxy, only to be forced to abandon everything and return home. "Fellow humans," Rebecca said, "we stand at a crossroads. The galaxy that rejected us is now begging for our return. They offer us everything they once denied: respect, equality, full participation in galactic affairs." The hall was silent. Every person there had lost something when they were forced to leave council space. Homes, careers, friends, research. Projects, entire lifetimes of work had been abandoned. But we must ask ourselves, do we want to return to a galaxy that only values us when they need us? Do we want to rebuild relationships with species that cast us out the moment they felt threatened by our success? Murmurs of agreement echoed through the hall. These people had learned the hard way that alien friendship was conditional. They had been useful when the galaxy needed their skills, but dangerous when those same skills made them too powerful. "I propose that we continue on our current path," Rebecca continued. "We build our own civilization, based on human values and human ingenuity. Let the galaxy see what they gave up when they chose fear over friendship." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would remain isolated. The breaking point for the Council came when the Dendari Collective launched a surprise attack on Altarian space. The Dendari were plant-like beings who had been part of the Council for over 2 centuries. They had always been peaceful, focused on growth and cultivation rather than warfare, but the communication breakdown had fragmented their society. Different Dendari colonies couldn't coordinate with each other or with their homeworld. Old philosophical differences became violent conflicts. The collective split into dozens of warring factions, each claiming to be the true government. General Kethava led the Altarian defense against the Dendari attack. Her silver wings were scarred from previous battles, and her orange eyes burned with fury. The Dendari had been allies for generations. Now they were enemies, attacking without warning or provocation. "Send a message to the Council," Kethva ordered her communications officer. "Tell them the Altarian Republic formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will defend ourselves." The message was the final blow to Council unity. With the Altarians gone, only 5 species remained in the organization that had once united dozens of civilizations. The Galactic Council, which had maintained peace for 3 centuries, was collapsing. Chancellor Vexhai sat alone in the empty council chambers. The great hall that had once echoed with the voices of 12 species now held only shadows. Most of the seats were empty. The few remaining delegates seemed small and lost in the vast space. "Chancellor," said his aide, a young Christek named Zil Noth, "we have received humanity's final response to our negotiation requests." Vexahai took the message crystal and activated it. The hologram that appeared was not President Santos or Admiral Thompson or any of the human leaders he expected. Instead, it was Dr. Lisa Yang, the former human ambassador. Chancellor Vexhai, Lisa's image, said, "I have been authorized to deliver humanity's final message to the Galactic Council. We acknowledge your requests for negotiation, and we formally decline. The human species has no interest in rejoining an organization that considers us a threat to galactic peace." The hologram paused, and Lisa's expression softened slightly. "You taught us an important lesson, Chancellor. You showed us that our friendship was never valued, only tolerated. You showed us that our contributions were never appreciated, only used. Most importantly, you showed us that we don't need your approval to be successful." The message continued. "Humanity wishes the remaining Council species well in their future endeavors. We hope you find the peace and stability you sought when You removed us from your organization, but you will find it without us." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Vex High alone with the silence of the empty chamber. Outside, reports continued to arrive. The final war began when the Council made their last desperate mistake. With only 4 species remaining in their organization and their territory shrinking daily, they decided that humanity's return was worth any price. If humans would not come willingly, they would be forced to return. Admiral Marcus Johnson received the Council's ultimatum while reviewing defensive positions around the Jupiter system. The message was delivered by the same Zephyrian Chancellor who had announced humanity's banishment 2 years earlier. But the purple-skinned alien looked different now. His once shining skin was dull, and his voice carried the weight of desperation. "Humanity must return to Council space immediately," the Chancellor declared. "The galaxy requires your services for the greater good. If you refuse, the Council will consider this an act of war against galactic peace." Marcus read the message, twice to make sure he understood correctly. The Council was threatening war against the same species they had banished for being too violent. The irony was so complete it was almost funny. "Sir," said Captain Laura Phillips, his chief of staff, "how should we respond?" Marcus looked out at the gas giant Jupiter, where human mining stations harvested fuel for the growing human fleet. Humanity had used their isolation well. Without the need to maintain diplomatic relations or follow Council regulations, human technology had advanced rapidly. Their ships were faster, their weapons more precise, their defenses stronger than ever before. "Schedule a meeting with President Santos," Marcus said. "It looks like the Council wants to learn about human violence after all." President Rebecca Santos called an emergency session of the Human Congress. Representatives from Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of other human worlds gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. The mood was different from previous meetings. Where once there had been sadness and uncertainty, now there was cold determination. "Fellow humans," Rebecca began, "the Galactic Council has made their final mistake. They demand our return to their service, and they threaten war if we refuse." The hall erupted in angry voices. These were people who had lost everything when they were forced to leave Council space. They had been called dangerous, unpredictable, and violent. Now the same aliens who had banished them were proving just how violent they could be. Senator Claire Adams stood up from her seat. She had coordinated humanity's exodus from Council space, and now she would help plan their response to Council aggression. "What are our options, Madam President?" "We have 2 choices," Rebecca replied. "We can submit to Council demands and return to our former positions as their servants. Or we can show them why they were right to fear us in the first place." The vote was swift and unanimous. Humanity chose war. The first battle took place at Proxima Gate, the main entry point into human space. The Council had assembled their largest fleet in decades, over 300 ships from 4 different species. They expected humanity to surrender when faced with such overwhelming force. Commander Tony Miller led the human defense fleet. His force was smaller, only 50 ships, but they carried technology the Council had never seen. During their isolation, human engineers had developed new weapon systems, new defensive shields, and new tactical computers that could process information faster than any organic mind. "Council fleet," Miller broadcast on all frequencies, "you are entering human space without authorization. Turn back immediately or face the consequences." The Council fleet's response was to open fire. Energy beams and missile salvos filled space around Proxima Gate. But the human ships seemed to dance between the attacks, their movements too fast and precise for the Council weapons to track effectively. Captain Laura Phillips commanded the destroyer New York's Revenge. Her ship had been built in the shipyards of Europa using technology developed during humanity's isolation. The weapons were more powerful, the shields more efficient, and the hull stronger than anything in the Council fleet. "Target their command ship," Laura ordered her weapons officer. "Full spread, all tubes." The New York's Revenge fired 12 missiles simultaneously. But these weren't ordinary missiles. Each one used adaptive guidance systems that learned from the target's defensive patterns. The Council command ship's point defense systems shot down the first 6 missiles, but the remaining 6 adjusted their approach and struck home. The massive Zephyrian battleship broke apart in a series of explosions that lit up space like a small sun. The sight of their flagship's destruction shattered Council morale. Ships that had advanced confidently into human space now tried desperately to retreat. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Council fleet was scattered wreckage floating in space. Of the 300 ships that had entered human space, fewer than 50 escaped to tell the tale. The human fleet suffered no casualties. Admiral Beth Thompson watched the battle reports from her command center on Mars. The numbers were overwhelming. A complete victory for humanity with minimal losses. But she knew this was just the beginning. Send a message to all Council worlds, Beth ordered. Tell them that human space is now an exclusion zone. Any Council ship that enters our territory will be destroyed without warning. The message was not a threat. It was a promise. The Council's defeat at Proxima Gate sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had remained neutral in the growing chaos now had to choose sides. Some planets declared independence from all galactic authorities. Others sought protection from the expanding Vorthon Empire. A few desperate worlds sent secret messages to Earth, begging for human protection. Dr. Frank Rodriguez sat in his laboratory on Europa, reading reports from the dying Aquarian worlds. The ocean planets were now completely uninhabitable. The coral cities had collapsed into poisoned seas. The Aquarian Federation, once a proud civilization of 12 billion people, was down to scattered refugee fleets searching for new homes. "Frank," said his colleague, Dr. Amy Peterson, "we're receiving a message from an Aquarian refugee ship. They're requesting permission to enter human space." Frank looked at the message. It was from Kethmar, an Aquarian marine biologist he had worked with for 15 years. The message was simple. "Please, my people are dying. We have nowhere else to go." Frank thought about the years he had spent on Aquarius Prime, working to protect and preserve their unique marine ecosystems. He thought about the friends he had made, the discoveries they had shared, the trust they had built together. "Send a reply," Frank said finally. "Tell them that human space is closed to all alien vessels. No exceptions." It was a hard choice, but a necessary one. If humanity started accepting refugees, it would undermine their policy of isolation. The galaxy needed to understand that there were consequences for their choices. The Vorthon Empire launched their final offensive against the remaining Council worlds. War Commander Thexel had been waiting for this moment, the chance to destroy the organization that had opposed Vorthon expansion for centuries. With humanity no longer protecting Council territory, nothing stood in his way. The attack on the Zephyrian homeworld was brutal and swift. Vorthon warships bombarded the planets, cities from orbit, while ground forces secured strategic resources. The purple-skinned Zephyrians who had voted to ban humanity were now experiencing the violence they had tried to avoid. Chancellor Velton, the new Zephyrian leader after his predecessor died in the Proxima Gate battle, sent one final message to Earth before his government fell. "You were right," the message said. "We needed you more than we feared you. I hope someday you can forgive us." Rebecca Santos read the message in her office overlooking Lake Geneva. Outside her window, human ships continued their constant traffic between Earth and the growing human colonies. Humanity was expanding again, but this time they were expanding into empty space, building their own worlds instead of trying to fit into alien societies. "Madam President," said her aide, Robert Chen, "the Christek Consortium is offering complete surrender. They want to become a human protectorate." Rebecca looked at the formal surrender document. The Christek were offering everything: their technology, their resources, their complete submission to human authority. It was tempting. The Christek had valuable mining operations and advanced crystal technology that could benefit humanity. "Decline their offer," Rebecca said. "Humanity doesn't want subjects or servants. We want to be left alone." The refusal shocked the remaining galactic powers. Everyone expected humans to take advantage of their military victory to build an empire. Instead, they continued to isolate themselves, ignoring offers of alliance and submission alike. Dr. Lisa Yang, the former human ambassador, now served as Earth's Secretary of Xenological Affairs. Her job was to monitor alien communications and track the collapse of galactic civilization. The reports that crossed her desk painted a picture of complete societal breakdown. The Void Raiders had overrun 17 systems, enslaving or killing everyone they found. The Vorthon Empire controlled 43 former Council worlds and was expanding rapidly. Dozens of minor species had gone extinct in the chaos. Billions of refugees wandered space in overcrowded ships, searching for new homes that no longer existed. "Dr. Yang," said her assistant, Carl Kim, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of the old Council core worlds. It looks like the Vorthans and the Raiders are fighting each other."